Puppetry can be a weird yet acceptable form of entertainment that can be creepy sometimes, or to some, very entertaining to watch. The problem with the decline of puppet shows in the younger demographic is basically demand. Not a lot of networks are looking for puppet shows like they used to, but it is a trend growing back on YouTube. Don't get me wrong, there are kids who enjoy watching puppets either at a live performance on stage or on television, or hell, even on the iPhone that you're watching on right now, or on the computer. Puppet entertainment is probably the oldest form of entertainment. But it's nostalgic to go back and remember the good times, watching our friendly characters go on adventures, or teach us something interesting. However, there is a large contradicting statement about puppet shows, and also cartoons. And it is that they are for kids. Well, that is true for some cases, but however, not all the time. Sausage Party is an animated movie, but not meant for kids. Although ratings were questionable, the creative idea of having a movie in CGI for an older demographic is a new niche not many content creators have tried out before. Happy Time Murders is another perfect example showing that not all puppet-made films are for kids. Sometimes there should be a film just for adults, because again, it would be funny to watch puppets acting like adults and acting with mature jokes here and there. It's not every day where you see a puppet show that's made for adults, but it's very rare and it barely happens on television. Crank Yankers is a puppet show intended for adults that just got renewed for another season. But however, there is no plot for the show, so it's untraditional for a puppet show to not even have a story. And also the fact that comedians are prank calling businesses, and it's basically recorded. So the entire time you're just watching puppets reenact a prank call. Not really a puppet show in general, but again, it is a puppet show, just not all about characters. There really isn't a plot, just a bunch of stories and basically prank calls. That's about it. Jim Henson was known for being the leader of puppeteering. He was also responsible for creating the Muppets. The Muppets are overly popular. Back in the day when they were really the cash cow of children entertainment and teaching kids how to learn ABCs and all that, he was just the god of puppeteering. The way he creates his films, the way he creates the Muppets, it's just part of his craft. The problem was he tried to mix it in with the older demographic. Basically, he was trying to make an adult show called The Muppet Show, Sex and Violence. That started in 1975. The problem with that is that he's using the same title, but putting sex and violence at the end of it. So really, it would be confusing because these characters shouldn't be, doing things for adults. They should be doing things for kids. And yeah, that, again, it is pretty confusing. Although there aren't really many puppet shows out there that are brand new and that are just being reused, such as Sesame Street or The Muppets, there really isn't that many puppet shows out there. Although there are some YouTube creators who basically base their content off of puppeteering, such as Puppet Review Stuff, Super Mario Logan, or Shark Puppet. But that's just to name a few. Oh, and Cottonmouth. How could I forget? There are some professional ventriloquists out there, well, except for Jeff Dunham is the only one I could name so far. And also Randy, the purple puppet from Australia. The one who likes to read and talks about Gumtree. There's different forms of puppeteering and it really shows. And it's very entertaining at the end of the day. But there is one show that has risen above that inspiration. One show that took puppeteering to the next level. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to a show that was short-lived but became iconic for standing out in the crowd. This show is not from this world. I'm talking about a show that existed in the United Kingdom on BBC Three. Let me introduce you to Mongrels. Known for being on the air on BBC back in 2010 during those good times, Mongrels was yet controversial due to the fact that it had some claims and some accusations. I would love to discuss that to you guys, but you have to watch the rest of the video. So, anyways, hope you enjoy this one. This is the Mongrels. Alright, before this video begins, don't forget to hit that like button, and also don't forget to subscribe for more content. I'll be making videos just like these at a later time. It took me a while to actually make this video, and to be honest, it might take me longer if this is the case. I mean, Jesus Christ, this show was so, there's just so much to go over with. So I'm glad I had the time to basically make this video to explain to you guys why this show basically just disappeared and nobody talked about it ever since. Our story begins with Adam Miller. Basically, he created the Mongrels, and he directed a bunch of shows in the past, such as Windsor's, Taking the Flak, BBC Comedy Feeds, and Zombo. But his recent show, Windsor's, has been nominated for an RTS Awards for Best Comedy. He also won an editing award for the Mongrels, I believe, and he also won another broadcasting award for Windsor's. So, yeah, I mean, this guy is just on top of his game. When it comes to directing, this guy knows what he's doing. He has so much experience that it's just part of his critique, and it's just his genes.
High volume, low cost shows that are playable pre-Watershed, but still original, fresh, bold, unconventional, and adult enough to...
But when creating the Mongrels, it was basically an experiment at first. It started out as a small budget show that was filmed at Miller's remortgaged house in London, and the puppets were designed by Andy Heath and Leston Evans. Basically, these two guys were the puppeteer team. He also brings John Brown along with him to help with the writing and basically creating the show. Without him, he wouldn't have the characters react in a realistic and comedic way.
Wife dies during childbirth, so he eats them all and leaves one of them. And I know that was something that people kind of felt uncomfortable with, but we just said, when you see it on screen and it's quite a gruesome scene, but when you see that with a puppet fox and the voices are quite heightened and the way it's written, it may look dark on the page, but we were confident that it was going to feel quite light, and I think it did. But like Adam said, I think we had to sort of do that because otherwise there's no point in them being animals in the first place. You could just, if you can shoot it with humans, then we tend not to do it. If you could take a story and you could just do it with Robert Lindsay, then we just say that's not working yet. So
the details in this show, when it came to puppeteering and making sure that the animals respond in a correct form and matter, where it seemed to be a little bit uncanny, but it worked either way. And it really matches up with what Jim Henson had in mind in the first place, to basically make puppets use of comedy, not for a younger demographic, but basically for an older demographic.
Sculpted or anything like that, but they're kind of the right shape that the puppet's going to be. They're the right. We use a fur, which is a very cheap fur, available from any corner store fabric shop. But it's just to get an idea of colours, and so we can try stuff out. And then we'll send a photograph of that off to the production team. They'll look at it, sort of give us the yay or nay, tell us what works and what isn't working, and then we can go on to building the proper puppet. Puppets.
Nervous about her because we didn't want her to look mechanical, alongside all of these other puppets that had literally had somebody's hand inside them, and so they look very organic.
Then we've also got sort of a style of glove puppet. So we've got our rodents, like our rats and our squirrels, which are pretty much operated like this. So you've got your hand up in the head, 2 fingers in the head, another finger in each hand.
The first character really in this series that we did that was largely latex was the Chimp, and he was significant because his whole face was latex. And as a result of that, we used the same technique for the tortoise and the goldfish.
There's only one recorded instance of a fatality caused by a flying cat's eye.
The puppets start out as a sketch, very initial sketch. Sometimes they're just sort of scribbles and doodles on a
broad, sort of just to get an idea of the character.
Really broad ideas,
shapes and what it's going to look like.
And then what we have started doing with this particular show is building little models, very rough. They're very, very rough models. They're not beautifully sculpted or anything like that, but they're kind of the right shape that the puppet's going to be. They're the right. We use a fur, which is a very cheap fur, available from any corner store fabric shop. But it's just to get an idea of colours, and so we can try stuff out. And then we'll send a photograph of that off to the production team. They'll look at it, sort of give us the yay or nay, tell us what works and what isn't working, and then we can go on to building the proper puppet.
Ah, Julian, I hear you've got a problem, mate. You're struggling to find high-volume, low-cost shows that are playable pre-watershed, but still original, fresh, bold, unconventional, and adult enough to really hit home with the 16-34-year-old audience, from the MySpaces and the progressives to the townies and the goths.
Sweet Lorraine, that fox really knows his demographics.
The good news is we've got the audacious, warm-hearted breakout comedy that's going to solve your problem right now.
It's about two 50-something drama students sharing a flat, and here's where it gets really
The
interesting.
show that's actually going to change your channel forever.
This, however, was a pitch reel used to propose to BBC Three executives, John Plowman, Cheryl Taylor, Julian Pellman, in a way to basically, not sarcastically, but I would say in a way exaggerate the fact that they needed help and they needed the show to be bought by BBC in order to continue productivity and production for the show in general. This was their proposal. This was their final shot in actually getting into the BBC network and actually getting Mongrels on the air. However, when it came to recreating his show, he didn't have an overall success. He had an idea, but the problem is not a lot of networks was going to allow him to make his show, and the fact that it's going to take him a while to get approved for an official release. So, in his tight budget, he created a show called The Unnatural World that was supposed to be about a fox called Nelson who was living in the city and lost his sense in being a normal animal. But there's his friend who's a cat, and this will play later on the final release of the Mongrels. And basically, it would be the fact that Nelson, the fox, was too much into the city life than he was being a natural animal himself. Living in a den, basically living in his own domicile, not being interrupted or bothered by nature. Unlike his friend who is a cat, who basically goes around in trash and tries to basically survive. Of course, the original pitch was going to be called The Unnatural World. That was supposed to be about a fox named Nelson who was used to living in the city and lost his sense in being normal. But there's a friend who's trying to get him back into becoming an animal, who's a cat. The basic point I'm trying to say is that basically this fox is thinking that he's more of a human than he is of an animal. So yeah, a good concept and a good plot. Of course, they had an issue trying to name the show and getting the title all together because they had an issue with copyright of using the titles, and of course it might be a problem because it would sound too close to what BBC Three already has. And so at first the title was going to be The Unnatural World, but however Madam Miller didn't really go with it. Of course, the title was going to be We Are Mongrels, but that was too similar to the show already on BBC Three called We Are Clank. Then they went with I, Nelson, Humans Everywhere, which I guess would be a common thing for animals to say in their personal point of view, and last but not least, Undergrowth and Never Been Stroked, which were again hard to find because if they had a title like that, I don't think it would be easy to find in a Google search bar. In fact, it would be hard for them because streaming is basically the #1 tool when it comes to entertainment. The Undergrowth and Never Been Stroked was basically a plot that was in season 1, episode 4, where Nelson basically talked about how he'd never been stroked before, and that he went to a petting zoo to basically replace an animal that was, being stroked a lot, I guess, and died because of it. Yeah. Now that we covered the title, the beginning, and basically the remortgage house Adam Miller was working in, we can now go down to basically what the plot of the show was. And it was a spiral out of control. It wasn't really into a focused thought at first. And of course, it did take 5 years for him to create, and he didn't have it all in his head at first. So Adam Miller had to basically do some research, find shows that were attractive to watch, something that was actually colorful, but yet similar to animation.
Behind Mongrels, where did the idea come from?
Well, Mongrels is a show, it's an adult puppet show really, about a bunch of animals living in the back garden of a pub in the East End of London. And the idea was to try and bring puppetry a bit up to date and do the sort of thing with puppetry that some of those bigger American shows like Family Guy and The Simpsons have done with cartoons.
So would you say that your influences were more cartoons or more comedy shows as such?
I think,
or puppetry, obviously?
I think probably more cartoons. A mixture of a lot of different shows, quite a lot of American shows as well. We wanted it to be really fast-paced.
Yeah.
Which hopefully we've achieved, and we wanted to, have a lot of things in it like songs and guests. So it was never going to feel like an ordinary sitcom, because to an extent you can't really look at a talking teddy bear for very long without getting a bit bored. So it's got to be quick moving. So right. Animation.
I don't know about that. Okay. John, from a writing point of view, what were the influences on your?
The best thing about the show is that the fact that Adam Miller wasn't afraid to use Western animation as a source of inspiration to basically make the show so revealing, so acceptable. In fact, Miller once said this when he tried to create the show: "We wanted to make something that had a piece of an American animation, but with British sensibilities, that was adult but not crude, that was based in the realities of the animal world, and that it didn't rely on the puppets to do the comedy." The filming crew, in my opinion, are really smart when it came to filming the show. Everything was just thinking outside of the box, and being clever, paying attention to every little detail was basically their niche and their critique when it comes to puppeteering. They had different mechanics for each puppet, with the ears and blinking, and for the fur on the puppets, they basically used anything they could get their hands on. If it wasn't for their fast thinking and using resources from any available resource out in London, they wouldn't be able to create such a beautiful show such as this one. The crew was environmentally friendly with the products they used to create each episode, basically recycling any products that they could have from production, helping them save at least £500, which is $691 in the US currency. And that was each week for almost a year. It's stuff like this that made me appreciate how much they cared about the show and how much they wanted to make people laugh their asses off when watching this show. Okay, so let's do the math. If Adam Miller was trying to save £500 almost every week, which is 52, that means he actually saved up 26,000 British pounds. If he were to live in the US, he would make $35,932. Adam Miller had a problem trying to figure out what the show could be about, but of course this was just a show with random schematics, like a bunch of schemes that happen in an episode, and it becomes the plot. Anyways, the show was all about 5 anthropomorphic animals who lived at the back of a bar in Millwall Isles of Dogs in London, where they hang around and do human-like stuff. They usually get in trouble along the way, but that's what made the show interesting in the first place to watch. The show follows a fox named Nelson, voiced by Rufus Jones, who is, again, I already mentioned it before, a metrosexual, basically meaning that he is bisexual and cares a lot about the latest fashion and shopping, being obsessive over his looks when walking in public. I think this would be remembered as a South Park episode because there was a lot of metrosexual things happening in that episode about metrosexuality. There's Destiny, an Afghan hound, voiced by Lucy Montgomery. Marion, a stupid cat that makes me laugh a lot by saying the most stupid and ignorant things ever. Dan Tessel, who basically voiced him, and he's a comedian himself. Callie the Pigeon, voiced by Katie Brand, a dark character but admiring when she's rude to other characters. She put a lot of life into this pigeon, I'm not gonna lie. But last but not least, the foul-mouthed fox, Vince, who is also a sociopath, voiced by Paul K, who I admired because he knows how to make nice voices. I mean, like, this guy basically he gave life to this character Vince. So this explains a lot why characters are a huge thing when it comes to puppeteering, because they need life. If you don't give them life, they're not gonna be interesting.
The concept behind Mongrels, where did the idea come from?
Well, Mongrels is a show, it's an adult puppet show really, about a bunch of animals living in the back garden of a pub in the East End of London. And the idea was to try and bring puppetry a bit up to date and do the sort of thing with puppetry that some of those bigger American shows like Family Guy and The Simpsons have done with cartoons.
What Adam Miller did was very risky. In fact, when it came to starting a show about puppets, it wasn't an interesting thing that everybody was going to basically put their hands on. It wasn't something that all the audience in the UK would be interested in. So it would be hard for him to actually get the budget to do this. So unfortunately, it took him 5 years to take him to basically do the show. And after that, he had to get more budgeting after the first season of the show. He only got 8 episodes, so that would be the very, thick iceberg that he had to go through.
So it was a very long process. We were commissioned for 8 episodes, predominantly because it's a very expensive thing to do to shoot puppets, and obviously we're all working within comedy budgets. So what we needed to do was shoot more eps so that the price per ep would come down. So it was a very long process. We were commissioned for 8 episodes, predominantly because it's a very expensive thing to do to shoot puppets, and obviously we're all working within comedy budgets. So what we needed to do was shoot more eps so that the price per ep would come down. So it was a very long process. We were commissioned for 8 episodes, predominantly because it's a very expensive thing to do to shoot puppets, and obviously we're all working within comedy budgets. So what we needed to do was shoot more.
So unfortunately, Adam Miller had to wait for 5 years for the show to actually take off, but it really paid off. Why? Because the show looks beautiful. It looks clean. It looks spectacular. The fact that he took this long to make the show, I really appreciated it. And I hope the audience that were fans of the show appreciate it as well. Because thanks to him, he was able to make the show popular enough to get another season. This guy really knew what he was doing. The show became a huge success, positive ratings overall, and a lot of people enjoyed it. It was something people would look forward to every Friday because that's where every new episode would be on. I saw the show around August, but then again, the episode 1 debuted on June 22nd, 2010. I caught wind of this show after it made me laugh my ass off. I saw it on Vimeo.com. I thought this was a kid's show, but of course, I was adventurous and I wanted to see the show for myself if it was for kids, but turns out it's something different. Of course, it didn't really apply to adult comedy at first, but I caught wind of it as soon as possible. And almost every episode had basically a music number where the characters would sing. It was very, traditional in a puppet show, so of course this would make sense. When I first saw the show, it made me laugh. It was really funny. Every episode was funny. It was just like Family Guy, but it was in a puppet-like form. This was hilarious. It didn't matter if it was just boring or if it was just British. It didn't matter to me. It was just funny. And that's what Adam Miller did. He brought Western culture into the United Kingdom. And that was fair game. And it was really good. Almost every episode was like 28 minutes. That's pretty long, but it's worth it given the fact that they make an episode feel like you just spent an entire day experiencing the British culture and basically the life in the United Kingdom. Although there are some harsh critics and small amount of fair negative points about the show, it did alright. 8.3 out of 10 in IMDb. The show did so well, in fact, it got renewed for another season. And from there, the show just took off. So yeah, you're gonna get a lot of haters, but if the show is successful, don't bother it. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's basically what Adam Miller said when he got into making the show. And you must be wondering, with the show doing so well, there's no way it could end up getting canceled, right? Well, you're wrong. Why? Well, the answer is pretty simple. The show got canceled. It was because of plagiarism and the fact that there was already a puppet show in the UK on BBC Three Studios. The cancellation actually happened in January 18th, 2012, and Tessel basically revealed that on Twitter. So, yeah, it was a very heartbreaking thing to do, but then again, people still loved the show, and there was a huge audience to back it up. So yeah, if you plagiarize something, you would get a harsh punishment for it. Just like if you write an essay and the teacher finds you plagiarizing something, it comes with a punishment. So that goes for Mongrels. They copied off a show that already existed in the 2000s, and I'm going to get to that. And that show was a little, lower budgeted. It really didn't get any attention, but it still existed in BBC Three Studios, and it was basically plagiarism altogether. So you must be wondering, what was the show that the Mongrels was basically copying off of, and why did Zy Bennett, the guy who was in charge of BBC Three Studios, had the decision to basically cancel the show? Well, this would be a shocker to you guys, but this was the show that Mongrels was accused of ripping off.
When I was 13, the doctor told me that I would never have children. I was devastated. He then explained that this was because I was a boy parrot. But it was a shock all the same. Dank die vader, dit was nie omdat my beeld te klein was nie. However, as it turns out, I did have children. And here they are. I made them out of papier-mâché. This is Gus. He's the eldest and quite a character. Next to him is Getreida, and I like to think she's got her mother's looks. And Peter, he's the baby of the family and keeps us all laughing. They're good kids most of the time, and I'm proud of all three of them. Yes, family are really important to me.
Oh, hell no!
So you might be wondering, what the hell is Pets the TV series? Well, you should have asked the question, what the hell is Mongrels? Well, I already told you what Mongrels was basically about, so Pets isn't far off from the plot. But the problem is, it's not worth watching. I mean, if you want to watch it, go ahead. It's kind of okay, but you just look at this.
Spag off.
Charming.
If you must know, it's a protest. Sort of political act. I am covering the walls with my own feces.
So what's different?
What do you mean?
Well, aren't you always covering the walls with your own shit? You normally call it going to the toilet.
My personal hygiene is beyond reproach. I'll have you know, I went through an entire roll of arsewipe last year.
I stand corrected. How many rolls did you use during the 1980s?
Don't remember. 5? No, tell a lie. 6.
So yeah, plagiarism is a thing for some reason. I've never heard of plagiarism in a television studio before that results in a entire cancellation of a show. But then again, I think about the show's name, Mongrels, how Adam Miller tried to figure out what was the right title for the show. So I'm guessing that when Pets had its own plot back in the 2000s, and we look at the Mongrels, there's a huge problem. The fact that he used the show's plot of the anthropomorphic puppet animals would pretty much be the shutdown of the show entirely. But the only problem is that the puppets are a little bit creepy and they give out like some type of creepypasta vibe. But I'll be talking about this later on in the video. So let's talk about Pets. Pets is a show that was on BBC Three Studios during 2001, I believe. And the fact that this show only had exactly, I believe, around 20 episodes, and it was supposed to be about 4 anthropomorphic animals that live together in an abandoned house. The show follows a brown dog named Hamish, and he's voiced by Ian. What was his last name again? Oh yeah, Ian Angus. And we got Petros Emmanuel, who voices the dysfunctional parrot JP. We got Sally Eldson, who voiced the Persian blue cat that is really creepy to look at, who is named Davina, by the way. Yeah, and it looks like she's doing a jump scare every time she reads a card, I guess, a letter from her ex-boyfriend. Yeah, every time I look at that cat, it looks like a jump scare is about to happen. I don't know, it's just me, I guess. But that cat is creepy to look at. And last but not least, we have Tevr the Bulldog, voiced by Andrew Barclay, who basically wrote and created the show himself. This show is almost 20 years old, and the fact that it wasn't officially cancelled by BBC Three Studios was probably the fact that why Mongrels had to suffer the consequences when it came to plagiarizing the show. And either way, I mean, it just didn't make any sense. The show didn't have much of an audience. It didn't really gain a fan base as big as Mongrels, and it could be because of the time differential. It was also a different timeline, so it wouldn't really do so good. 2010 was more innovative. There was things being invented right on the spot. The iPhone was really new, and I guess because of social media expanding so well, Mongrels was just that successful. Well, versus Pets, you can't really say much because 2001 was a little bit basic when it came to expansion and marketing. So there wasn't a lot Pets to TV series could do. If the people didn't like it, they wouldn't watch it. And if it didn't grab any attention, then of course it would do bad. So yeah, the show gives often a creepy vibe from almost every episode when the characters start talking, and the fact that when it comes to puppeteering, the voices are a little bit slowed. Like it looks like they're having a lag moment every time they're talking. It's kind of weird, but it's something that I've caught on from this show. So yeah, the show basically started from 2001, and there was nothing known about it afterwards. There was only 2 seasons, and it was bought by Fox Australia afterwards. And you must be wondering, is this show still running since there are people defending the show with a iron malice? And the answer is no. This creepy ass show died with only 2 seasons, just like Mongrels, and it did not improve or got renewed for another season. Thank God, because this show has a lot of problems. Although the cast gave it their all when it came to acting and when it came to producing, they knew what they were doing, but they were missing a lot of key values, such as the voice acting, to give the characters a little bit more energy. That's what was wrong with the show. And I'm not trying to blame the crew, it's just that they didn't know what the ideal of actual animals reacting towards each other, having an environment that actually fits well with the show. And I'm just gonna put it down in 3 key values of why this show did bad. And this is just theories, okay? I mean, it's not factual at all. It's just given based on the evidence of how this show didn't do so well. The voice acting is bland. It's kind of boring to watch, I'm not gonna lie. It's like you're listening to a character talk into a really quiet room, and it often could be creepy in a way. Of course, this show looks like it belongs to a creepypasta, but this is not to insult the show in general. It's just that the voice acting was a little bit boring and a little bit too bland. No life or energy given to the characters whatsoever. But compared to the Mongrels, the characters have so much energy, so much life. It brightens the whole entire show, so it gives up a vibe that you enjoy watching. Number 2 would be the setting of the place, where it took place basically in an abandoned mansion or house, wherever you want to call it. I think it was abandoned flat. So yeah, the flat is just a horrible, creepy little place that these characters are inside of, an environment that is decayed and is filled with feces, leftover food, all this dirty crap. And you would think that all this stuff would make the show a little bit more appealing, but then again, it's degrading to look at. So again, I wouldn't say that this show would be the most appealing puppet show out there, but this would be one of the reasons why this show didn't do so well. Pets, they don't belong indoors. That's why sometimes they live outside. And the fact that domestic pets used to live in nature, they don't live inside of houses. It just doesn't make any sense. When you look at Mongrels, the main character, Nelson, lives in a den underground outside in the back of a pub. I give credit to the cast of creating the environment Nelson is living in. Of course, it has some of the fox tendencies of living underground, but at least he made it like a domicile that's like inside of a house, kind of like The Hobbit. Number 3, the plot. It only takes place in the filming room where they were just having the puppets talk to each other in one place, where they smear a bunch of shit on the walls and ketchup and whatever. I mean, I understand it's animals inside of a house that are making stuff messy because they're animals. That makes sense. However, the problem with this show is that there's not a lot to be seen here. There's not a lot of characters to develop from here. There's not a cast that is large enough like the Mongrels. The Mongrels, you see a lot in London. You see a lot that goes on in British culture. So to sum it up, this show really had a problem just making the environment look so colorful. There were celebrity guests in Mongrels. Unlike Pets TV series, they didn't have anything like that. I don't want to blame them for this, but of course this would be their downfall of why the show didn't do so good. And thus concludes Pets. There wasn't much done for the show. I mean, it just had 2 seasons, and that's all they had for it. So there was a DVD release of the show, but very little was known about it, and a very few copies were made and sold. So this show was just a disaster from the start. The place where they filmed looked awful. I don't know why, but there is reasons why animals don't live by themselves in houses. And this is the reason why. I mean, just look at Nelson, the way he lives. It's clean, it's nice. This show just doesn't often give that type of vibe. And it's just messy, it's just bad, it just doesn't look good. Not a lot of people should enjoy the fact that animals should live in houses. This is the reason why we have pet sitters, people. Saying this show plagiarized the series Pets is like saying Family Guy copied off of The Simpsons, and so Family Guy should be cancelled by the executive of Fox because of it. But both shows pulled their own weight and gained a massive fan base because of that. It is considered an American treasure in adult animation, and both people could argue that one show copied off the other, but The Simpsons were first, so they're always victorious when it comes to making plots and episodes. Just because the Mongrels was a puppet show that was made for adults doesn't mean that it should be taken off the air. But unfortunately, Mongrels, the series, fell victim of being falsely accused for plagiarism. But that's in my opinion, and most of the fans that want to back up the show. But I don't think they're there anymore, of course. So as we reach to the conclusion, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Of course I make videos like these almost all the time. It just, this one right here took a lot to edit, so I would appreciate a thumbs up, and thank you for subscribing to my channel. And don't forget to hit that notification bell just in case you miss a video. So yeah, what could we take away from this video in general? Well, it can be that with hard work and dedication, you can reach higher expectations, but if you don't do your research, you might get fucked over. But in all seriousness, this show was very well made. It took Miller over 5 years to make this show, and a lot of money saving went into the show. In fact, the show was known for being environmentally friendly. They had to use reusable water bottles from tanks of tap water to double-sided scripts. They used reusable or compostable cutlery in their canteen, reducing future merchandise packaging with just a barcode. Fluorescent light bulbs for the lighting, which saved a lot of money for the show, so they could continue putting budgets into certain productions. So at the end of the day, Mongrels and Pets both brung each other down just by being, well, dormant for so long. And the fact that both shows were kind of close to being, what, 20 years old, one being 10 years old, really didn't matter, but hopefully one day Mongrels will come back and revive what pets have failed to do, which is gain an audience and become a really popular show like Family Guy or Simpsons. This show had some potential. And at the end of it all, Adam Miller left a thank you note to basically his fans and BBC 3 Studios for giving him a chance for actually launching a show like this. He wasn't mad after all, but at the end of the day, he was appreciated, and this is what he had to say. Mongrels, friends, it is my unbearably sad duty to announce that we will not be returning for a third series on BBC 3, a decision that has been made based on the fact that apparently you need more than 2 people watching a program to make it successful. Crazy talk, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everyone at BBC Comedy, BBC 3, and BBC Worldwide, who have supported us so strongly over the years, and helped us put our little puppet show out on the digital screens of the nation. I'd also like to thank from the bottom of my heart all the writers, cast, crew, and support team who have made a horribly challenging show such an utter joy to make. This news could not be less of a reflection on your brilliant work. Most of all, I'd like to thank those of you that loved watching Mongrels as much as we loved making it. It's wonderfully reassuring to think that we weren't mad after all, and that we'd find funny. Other people do too. I'd like to believe that there's room on television for a little show like ours, one that's not just another sitcom, one that tries to do things a bit differently, and that tries to push a few boundaries here and there. Who knows, maybe we'll find that room in the future. I hope it has a mini part. Thank you for watching, both of you. They say British comedy could be sometimes boring and dull, but sometimes it could be hilarious. I mean, I watched Chewing Gum on Netflix, The End of the Fucking World, and Sex Education as representations of British comedy, drama, mixed together. And we can see that in Mongrels as well. But the problem is Mongrels is more of a Family Guy type vibe, and I enjoy that. So why not bring it to the Western atmosphere where America could enjoy watching this show and give it a taste, give it a shot, you know? And a lot of television networks executives are looking for shows just like Mongrels, so why not put that in the spotlight? Why not put that in the television timeline? Why not? So yeah, hopefully one day we could see Mongrels in the future. Hopefully either in a streaming platform or probably in the television networks in US.